G'day, mate. 40 here. So do you think the United States will be stronger or weaker, depending on if Donald Trump gets his preferred cabinet picks through? Right? Other nations will look at Donald Trump as weaker if he doesn't get his picks through, and they will look for ways to get around Donald Trump. They will look for ways to do things without having to give in to Donald Trump. So America's standing in the world will depend in part upon Donald Trump's ability to get his nominees through selection. I don't like the most controversial nominees. I don't like Pete Hegseth, Matt Gaetz, and I particularly don't like Bobby Kennedy. But I got to admit that it's amusing watching global leaders scramble to try to align with Donald Trump, and they will be much more incentivized to do that if Donald Trump gets his picks through. And here's a good liberal, Ian Bremmer.
Just a little on the global, because, I mean, if you think that Republicans who privately don't really like Trump are publicly all lining up and saying this is God's gift, you've seen nothing compared to what you're going to see from allies of the United States all over the world, who know that they get crosswise with the president-elect at their own peril. He is a lot more powerful, and his country is a lot more powerful than their own. We've already seen that with Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel saying that an upcoming Lebanon ceasefire would be a gift to the president-elect. We've seen Zelensky in Ukraine saying, you know, great meetings, great phone calls. Of course, the war is going to be over faster with the policies of the incoming president-elect. We're seeing all sorts of outreach from individual European leaders, Asian leaders saying, you know, we can't wait to find a way to work with this guy. Congratulations. Please don't tariff us. Please don't cause any problems for our country. So I do think we're going to see a lot of wins in the near term from countries all around the world, because the alternative is problematic. And when you look at, you know, the G7, the G20, NATO, it is different from last time around in a few ways. First of all, that you now have a number of countries that are ideologically aligned with Trump, and there's going to be more in the near term. I mean, Giorgia Meloni, who is the most popular of G7 leaders.
Right. Donald Trump is not the lone populist nationalist exception. All right. We're having more countries turning in a populist nationalist direction.
Assertively is someone who sees herself much closer to Trump's worldview in terms of immigration policy, social policy, even to a degree economic policy. And that is going to make him feel much more comfortable when he's sitting at those summits. That wasn't the case first G7 summit he attended last time around. Canada is still Justin Trudeau, but won't be for long. And soon Canada's going to be Pierre Poilievre, who runs the Conservative Party and is absolutely much more aligned with Trump and be a very close friend of the U.S. president-elect when he becomes Prime Minister of Canada. Of course, you've got the Gulf states on board with Trump. You've got the Israelis much more aligned with him than otherwise. The South Korean leader, President Yoon, a conservative, taken up.
Right. So Germany, France, the main European powers not happy with Trump's election victory. But throughout the Middle East, people prefer Donald Trump. I think throughout Asia, people prefer Donald Trump. And in countries such as Italy and Hungary, people much prefer Donald Trump. And in Latin America, I suspect that people prefer Donald Trump.
Golf again, so that he'll be able to play with Trump effectively, and wants to be, you know, sort of the new Shinzo Abe from Asia in terms of being able to maintain stable relations. That's one reason. A second reason is that there's a lot more at stake. The world is much more dangerous. Getting Trump wrong is a lot more costly when you've got a major war going on in Europe, a major war going on in the Middle East, when the U.S.-China relations are in a worse place, but China's under much more economic pressure at home than they were before. So getting it wrong is trouble. And so already seeing outreach from the Chinese to the United States saying, look, here are some things that might be the beginnings of a deal. We could buy more U.S. treasuries. We could maybe organize, you know, a Ukraine conference. We could, you know, buy a bunch more American goods. Like, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? So I'm not saying it's going to go well, but clearly there is more such orientation. And then you have the fact that Trump is...
Right. If you're a patriotic American, why would you not enjoy this prospect of other nations and their leaders trying to figure out how to align with America's president? Seems like a good thing for America.
He's more powerful at home in the United States. He has the House, he has the Senate, and he's creating far more loyalists around him as opposed to...
Right. The more power that Donald Trump has, the more incentivized other nations will be to bend the knee to what he wants.
Adults that are more independent in his own cabinet, which means that if you are a foreign leader, your ability to work around Trump with other parts of the U.S. political firmament is very constrained. And all of that implies that whatever it is that Trump decides he wants to do going forward is going to be what other leaders are going to have to engage with and align with. There are big problems from a Trump administration coming in. He's not interested in multilateralism. He doesn't want a strong European Union. He's prepared to end the Russia-Ukraine war even at terms that are problematic for the Ukrainians. Has very little interest in promoting rule of law or democracy internationally. In fact, one of the most interesting things about Trump and the United States for right now is that for almost half a century, the U.S. has been trying to get the Chinese to orient more towards an American worldview. This is what the idea of responsible stakeholdership was, that China was meant to play more of a leadership role in U.S.-led multilateral institutions, promote U.S.-led rule of law and values on the global stage, and become more aligned with the Americans and its allies over time as it got wealthier. Turns out China hasn't done that, but America has. The United States is becoming more like China on the global stage, much more transactional in their foreign policy, indifferent to the values of other countries or the political systems and economic system of other countries on the global stage, certainly not interested in the global promotion of democracy or even rule of law, and rather bilateral relations between the U.S. and other countries where the U.S. is more powerful to get the outcomes that they want, exactly the way the Chinese engage globally. It has been successful for China in many places because they're more powerful than most of the other countries they deal with, except the Americans. They've had challenges in Southeast Asia, for example, because the U.S. has led a more multilateral approach on things like the South China Sea. Doubt you're going to.
So, yeah, as I listened to that video, I thought, okay, those are some good, strong arguments for why it's in America's best interest to have Donald Trump get his picks confirmed, right? It makes America seem much stronger when we're all aligned.
Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, they're looking to slash wasteful spending and non-essential personnel. Ramaswamy posted today on X that he's heard government unions are, quote, scrambling to update their collective bargaining agreements to avoid getting fired. The prospect of being asked to return to the office 5 days a week, can you imagine that? Like most working Americans, apparently has them in tears. Joining me now, Victor Davis Hanson, Hoover Institution Senior Fellow. Victor, we may have found something harder than cutting air with a knife, and that's getting federal bureaucrats back in the office. It's wild.
So just the stronger, the tougher that Donald Trump appears, the more his enemies are going to be incentivized to capitulate to him. Looking at the chat, if Trump doesn't go on offense now, he'll forever be on defense. Trump needs to show the woke world how the world effing works. The strong take what they want, the weak endure what they must. Now, another thing that got me thinking along these lines was watching Steve Bannon, and I am not some unabashed Steve Bannon show. I started watching the Steve Bannon show, War Room, Steve Bannon's War Room, after the 2020 election, and it was crap. It was really low quality. And so it's not easy for me to come back here and say I just heard something from Steve Bannon and it seemed pretty powerful, but this does feel pretty powerful. Now, I am sure you can pick apart the details. I do not trust Steve Bannon. He's not someone who optimizes for truth. He optimizes in large part for his own self-interest, which is why he's facing all sorts of criminal and civil penalties. He optimizes for his own self-interest. He optimizes for his political causes. He's a complicated man, but he's an inspiring speaker. And here he is talking with Sean Spicer.
Where you have the areas he really wants to focus on, things that need some restructuring, are things like the intelligence community with Tulsi Gabbard, obviously DOJ with Matt Gaetz, and the other people he'll announce. I think the DAG, as you remember, the DAG, the Criminal Division, OLC.
Deputy Attorney General for everybody who's not.
Yeah, Deputy Attorney General.
I know you're a swamp guy. So.
Hey, I'm just giving you inside baseball. So the Deputy Attorney General actually runs the building. And folks, just so you should know, I think Sean would agree that the most complicated job in all of DC, with many complicated jobs, is the Attorney General. everything, whether it's Defense Department, State Department, DHS, to Treasury, everything goes across the Attorney General's desk, everything. And
so let me paint this picture, though. I get, we can talk about the other picks in a second, right? And so far, I don't see an argument against the other picks. I know people are shocked and surprised. But here's the thing. I think that Matt Gaetz scares the crap out of not just Democrats, but some Republicans, especially in the Senate.
Some. The timing of Wednesday, the other day, was, Thune stepped up and said, okay, I'm open. We're going to do the Trump agenda. And, my job is to, and he and Cornyn swore, we may not need the recess. We're not going to do the recess because we will stay here every day until they get approved. Okay, bro, suck on this. I'm going to give you Pete Hexes. Matt Gaetz, and I'll throw in a Tulsi Gabbard on top of it. So have at it.
But okay, so among the three, I got to say this. Here's the thing. Someone said to me, multiple people said, Pete Hegseth, I mean, is he really qualified? I go, well, so he deployed 3 times. He ran a VSO, a veteran service organization called Concerned Veterans for America. He was an officer, what part of, and he's written multiple books on the military. He went to Harvard. I mean, so I'm sorry, which qualification?
I went to Princeton.
I'm sorry.
There's an article about how Haredi Jews, the most religious Jews in America, swung behind Trump in this election. Now, the Haredi community in New York is traditionally registered as Democrat because the majority in the city council, state assembly have been Democrats for decades. But now, because of the pandemic, school funding, and a growing alignment with conservative policies, the Orthodox community is increasingly aligned with Republicans. And so we got one observer says, Trump has a Haredi mentality. Succeed at all costs, unrefined speech, disdain-free elites, especially in academia, makes him relatable to a lot of Haredim. Haredim have usually had an inclination towards conservatives, but what Trump did was draw people in through his personality, his populism. He brought them deeply into the party to the point where Haredi Jews now find themselves immersed in political thoughts and principles, right? The political thoughts and principles of the Goyim. For the first time, grand rabbis are competing for the attention of their followers with political figures. 10, 15 years ago, it was very uncommon for an average Hasidic man to donate to a politician. Now you see regular Hasidic Jews donating to, going to, organizing rallies for Trump. This kind of enthusiasm was once reserved alone for their religious leaders. So in 2020, the Satmar rabbi, Aaron Teitelbaum, publicly condemned Trumpism as a harmful influence. This election, he shifted course and endorsed Donald Trump. At the Madison Square Garden rally, there was a large invisible contingent of Haredi men supporting Donald Trump. They like Trump because of his stance on Israel and because of their hatred for left-wing politics. So the average Haredi spends half of Shabbat reading newspapers. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They're also susceptible to confirmation bias. Haredim have a strong connection to Israel. Nearly everyone knows or is related to someone who lives or studies there. While their rejection of Zionism is largely theological, they still care deeply about Israel. They recognize its significance. Trump is good for Israel. With him, Israel can win. And you'll find photos of Mayor Kahana with the slogan, Kahana was right. Kahana held that Israel should kick out its Arab population. Even if you speak to anti-Zionist sects such as the Satmar Hasidim, they cite emotional connection to Israel as a major factor in their political decision-making. And so particularly after the October 7 Hamas massacre, Haredi Jews have become more and more concerned about Israel. Most Haredi Jews want to raise our families in health, security, and financial stability. And these values don't seem to align with the direction that the socialist wing of the Democratic Party is taking. So it's hilarious that now the major rabbis in New York have to compete with Donald Trump for influence.
I think he has an advanced degree from Harvard, but we call him a Princeton guy.
Oh, okay. See, I wouldn't know. But I guess the thing that's so funny is I said, so explain to me what the qualification you're looking for, because he served, he deployed, he fought, he led an organization. Yeah. He's highly intelligent, clearly, in terms of where he went to school, right? And they were like, well, I mean, I go, so what you're saying is, let's just be clear. He didn't come from like the establishment, right? He didn't come from Boeing or General Dynamics, or he wasn't a retired four-star.
Look, here's, I think, you've been in the building. Here's, I think the question is, and we will put people around him like that. He'll be leadership. It is the most complicated industrial concern in the world. The complexity of the issues, the weapons procurement, the material command. I mean, I was a special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations back in 81 to 83. And my job was to sit in those decision meetings and be the scribe and kind of vet the presentations. It was so mind-numbingly complex. It's just, and it metastasized this since then. I think the hit on Pete is going to be, well, first of all, the swamp doesn't want him because he is a breath of fresh air. And he's like, right. I love putting up junior officers into those positions above the flags, particularly when they have leadership. You have to put a team around him, his deputy, other people like that, because it's the biggest. And the budget's $1 trillion, and as you know, Sean, how complex, and particularly at the high level, where you got to organize and make sure we fight as one unit. All the weapons procurement, and Pete's been very big spokesman on this, how he doesn't think that China's well ahead of us in technology. So this is where I see actually Elon Musk and people like Vivek. I know they're going to redo the government.
Does anyone here watch or listen to Steve Bannon regularly? He has one of the most popular podcasts in the country. I tuned him out after I gave him 10, 15 tries at the end of 2020, and I just found it such low quality. But here, he seems to be back in the reality world.
I see them being a big help to Pete Hegseth, and I think the team the president puts around him is going to be critical. And I think it'll be critical for his confirmation. I think it will get confirmed, subject to his financial and personal stuff all being sorted out. But I think it'll get confirmed. But I think you have to give some cover to people to say, hey, we're going to put guys in, because he's never run a big organization. I honestly believe that what happened on Wednesday, as you know, we fought the Thune thing. I think the Thune situation cruised through, and that Scott, who I don't think really had a shot, was out, because I thought the Hegseth nomination, I think, got a lot of those guys over there saying, hey, I gotta have some air cover here. Yeah.
Well, the thing that's interesting, you mentioned China. I'm like, here's the problem, and I've been trying to explain this to people. When the priority in the building, as we say in the DoD, is like, let's make sure we have DEI training, as opposed to warfighter readiness. Let's make sure we can take on the enemy and defeat them and protect the country. That's the priority, not whether or not we've done training about equity and inclusion.
Hang on. We've had two problems. That's one, as it got woke, but there's a more fundamental systemic problem. Remember, Obama in 2009, his big thing was pivot to Asia. And his whole pivot to Asia was forward deploying one Marine combat brigade.
Okay, this was the point that Steve Bannon made that more than anything made me think, wow, maybe Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth and these controversial picks, maybe they're a good idea after all. I find this point here that Bannon's making powerful.
To Darwin, Australia. He couldn't do it because the Centcom mentality, I mean, I don't need to tell you this, but the Centcom mentality of the building is locked in. Now, even with Trump and even with Biden, our ability to really, which I think we have to do, is to pivot in a multi-service way, not just the Navy, but to East Asia and to Taiwan and to the South China Sea and to the East China Sea, Indo-Pacific, has been brutal. Let's be honest, we haven't done it because the building's been very reticent to do it. Centcom still has a center of gravity in the Pentagon that has been and they're going to look at Pete, and a lot of those guys are going to lick their chops. They're going to go, hey, I got a brave junior officer. He fought in the Middle East. He's attuned to what's happening, and I think Pete will surprise him. But if you want to,
right, we should be pivoting to Asia, right? Our main geostrategic political rival is China. We should be pivoting to Asia. If Centcom has been resisting this for 10 years now, maybe we do need this radical change.
Real pivot to Asia and to take the Chinese Communist Party on and let them know militarily that we can actually defend Taiwan. It's going to be a lift, and you're going to need the entire team. Waltz, and here's what I like about Waltz Rubio. People blowing up their neocons. I said, yeah, they have those tendencies, but in the House and in the Senate, we have the two hardest anti-CCP guys. I mean, Rubio's report he put out on the CCP's 100 top guys and the assets they own is a breathtakingly, brilliant study of putting the CCP on notice. So I think Waltz and Rubio will be there. I think Pete will be there.
Right. I started listening to this last night, and I thought maybe Trump's picks are a good idea after all.
I think the big thing you're going to see as we try to get peace in Ukraine, peace in the Middle East, is a true pivot to Asia to actually be able to show the Chinese Communist Party that we are prepared militarily to take on all comers, and not just with the Seventh Fleet.
I hate to interrupt this conversation, but Steve looks good too.
Okay. Boy, Sean Spicer does not stint on the advertising.
It's out of Afghanistan. I want things changed up. And they would come in and say, okay, course of action one is we do everything.
Right. So I didn't get the intro here. There are many times that President Trump would come and say, hey, I want to start getting us out of Afghanistan. I want to change things up. And then the military would come in and say,
saying course of action two is we add more people. And he would start to blow up and say, what part of change don't you get? And I think with Pete Hegseth, he's got so
right. The deep state, Centcom, the U.S. military consistently defied Donald Trump. Maybe we need these radical picks.
When right off the bat is going to go, I got it. and we're going to come back with a solution, as opposed to we're going to dress up the same old thing with just a better PowerPoint slide.
Gosh darn it. Maybe Trump's right. Maybe this is the way to go.
The Jesse Waters prime time tonight.
President-elect Donald Trump.
The sound in this room is so loud in here. It is so loud.
The culture, the Donald, the new way of life.
He did the Trump dance. He did the Trump dance.
Stop screaming at people to get with the program and instead make a program worth getting with.
The Democrats having an identity crisis.
Do me this favor. Shut the up.
Thank you.
Joe gets lost in the jungle. Plus,
what have you heard about his cabinet?
It's messy.
What do you think he's got in there?
He's got cheese in there because he's a rat.
All right, Steve Saylor has a blog post out saying our culture is healing. And I see these examples of this just all over the place. Right, Steve Saylor says, post-election, celebrities seem to be rethinking the excesses of woke cancel culture. An interesting side effect of Trump's broad-based victory seems to be that it's encouraging formerly woke celebrities to act more decently and to regret their participating in cancel culture pile-ons during the Great Awokening. I think he's right.
he went back.
45, soon to be 47, President-elect Donald Trump.
I wish the people at home could hear the sound in this room. It is so loud in here. It is so loud. It's always loud when he comes here, but now that he's won, now that he's the president again, oh my God.
After regaining the presidency earlier this month in emphatic fashion with an election blowout of the Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris. Congratulations, sir.
47 rolling into the Garden for UFC fight night, and he brought the motley crew. Elon, RFK, Tulsi, Vivek, Dana White, Kid Rock, and if you look real close over Kid Rock's fur coat, you can see Speaker of the House Mike Johnson tagging along. The main event was outside the octagon. Everybody was trying to get close to the next president. Former Mayor Eric Adams to Jelly Roll to the fighters themselves, like heavyweight champ John Jones, who knocked out his opponent with a rib kick and then hit the YMCA.
Good kick to the body by John.
Oh, I don't think I can show that. I'll get a copyright. Well, doggone it. But then after he wins, I think maybe I can show this. Very honest Trump. Yeah, here we go.
He did the Trump dance. He did the Trump dance.
The champ then took Rogan's mic and gave Trump a shout out. Listen.
I also want to say a big thank you to President Donald Trump for being here tonight. Can I get a oh yeah? Hey, what do you guys think about my version of the Donald Trump? Check it out. USA, let's go.
Jones even hopped out of the cage and handed Trump his championship belt. Not sure if he took it home, but that could look nice in the Oval next to Churchill's bust. CNN said they felt like they were in a time machine.
It really looks like ancient Rome here. This is sort of the conquering Republican Caesar who's going into the Colosseum and everyone's cheering and he's got his political gladiators with him. That appearance isn't just about him enjoying the applause. He's sending a message to the Senate.
For sure.
Like, not only are you entertained, but these are my people and are you willing to fight? Because here's who I have.
The media went from Hail Hitler to Hail Caesar. Like Tiger said, winning takes care of everything.
Why do you think they relate so well to the president?
Well, if you saw the election, the entire country relates with Trump right now. I think the whole country, it feels like somebody hit the reset button.
It wasn't just inside of the octagon, it was inside of the ring. The other big fight this weekend, Mike Tyson took on Jake Paul. And now Harold Ford owes me 2 dinners. Here's the problem child after the decision. Listen.
This night's not about me, man. I wanted to give a thanks to all the real heroes, the U.S. military, the doctors, the nurses in the ER, the cops, the firefighters, the farmers, the truck drivers, all the people who make this world go around. Thank you, America. It's the era of truth. It's the era of good. There's a shift in the world, and good is rising. The truth is rising. I'm just honored to be a part of America, and it feels like we're back, baby.
Like JFK said, victory has 1,000 fathers, and defeat is an orphan. Trump's become the hottest celebration in the NFL.
4th and 7. Oh, stop that. Stop giving me these commercials. I can't show. Okay, he does they sack and then they do the Trump dance.
23 yards for the rookie.
They're all doing the Trump dance. But I can't show it or I'll get a copyright
The NFL
strike.
went from kneeling to doing the Trump dance. He's officially the counterculture. Everyone's smiling, even Hunter Biden. Here he is riding Dumbo at Disneyland. That's where you go when you win. Does Hunter know something? The mood is just so freaking hot. That's what Republicans are saying in Palm Beach. Inside of Mar-a-Lago, it's cloud 9 at all times. The New York Times says when Trump's not running through personnel, he's been spotted in the tea room beneath the gold canopied roof or out on the Mar-a-Lago patio, picking out music on his iPad and blasting Pavarotti. It's party time at the Winter White House, and everybody wants to get on the guest list.
When you were growing up, your perception of politics was that Democrats were the cool party and Republicans were the party of lame, upright scolds. I have the same perception. I think we're around the same age, and my perception was reinforced by my time working for Barack Obama. You argue that somewhere along the line, the perception of the parties switched.
Secret Trump voters are even throwing coming out parties. In blue counties, neighbors are putting up Trump yard signs after the election. And in blue cities, people are rocking MAGA hats, not afraid of getting sucker punched. Like I told my mom after the election, like the Stones song, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need.
You're getting what you get. That's who the guy is, and I like him. I've grown to like him. I had a much more negative opinion of him back in the day, but as time went on, I was like, oh, you need a guy that is completely crazy to expose how corrupt the whole system is.
Yeah. Trump's like an acquired taste, and he's suddenly catching on everywhere. They called him Hitler, but when he won, they wanted to be at his party. And the media has FOMO.
First is congratulations. You not only won, you won big.
He won big.
Everybody should get props just for success, despite the vulgarities and
maybe because of vulgarities.
Maybe because, but also my mantra: losers look in the mirror.
Well, I think that's what everybody has to do.
Other members of the media are making pilgrimages to Mar-a-Lago.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, and it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. Joe and I realized it's time to do something different, and that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
Morning Joe went to Mar-a-Lago to mend fences. Let that sink in. Before they had key lime pie with him Friday, this is what they were saying about the guy.
He is running to end American democracy as we know it. He's an authoritarian, assassinate generals that weren't sufficiently politically loyal to him. That's sort of straight out of the Nazi playbook. This is not a reach. I could go back and talk about Nazi Germany, and I do it without any concerns whatsoever. And if people can't start drawing the parallels, well, you're just stupid, or you have your head in the sand, or you're one of them.
So that was all a lie. Their ratings are down, their network's for sale, and they're irrelevant. So they just want to rehab the relationship. On again, off again, on again, off again. It's like high school. Trump could have easily pushed them into the pool and made them walk back to their Uber wet. But Trump was the bigger man. He says the meeting with Morning Joe was extremely cordial, and they congratulated me on running a great and flawless campaign.
Okay. That's amazing to see. All right, Elliott Blatt, you tired of winning, bro?
It gets better every day. It's like a. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. The culture is cleaning itself.
Here, let me shut off the other. Okay, I have to shut off the other. Okay, so yeah, you get my point about offense, right? So we're in a chess game, right? And sometimes you're competing just to maintain neutrality. Sometimes you're defending, meaning you're on the back foot, but you're more or less staying equal. And then there's times when you need to attack. And in fact, if you don't attack, your opponent will attack and you'll get overrun. So this is the time. This is the narrow window. This is the opening that comes once in a lifetime. And you must attack at this point, and you must attack relentlessly. This is what a chess player would do in this circumstance.
Yeah, but a chess player doesn't just attack with any piece in any way, right? He carefully plots his moves with a goal in mind, winning the match. And so that's what Trump should do as well. You don't just sacrifice all your pieces. You don't just attack with any piece. You pursue a strategy. So Trump needs to pursue a strategy and pursue effectiveness, because just going on attack, nobody who succeeds does that, just blindly attack, right? You have to have a strategy and you have to use good judgment.
Right, but most of the time, just to continue the chess, I mean, you're right, like 90% of the time, right, it's foolish to attack heedlessly without sufficient support for your attack. You need like a broad, you need pieces that can come in and play into the attack and make it a successful attack, and then you win, right? And then it's a decisive outcome. And what I'm saying is this is one of those times. And so any call for moderation here is actually misplaced and shows a lack of strategic ability.
Right, but it's too general. Like, you have to attack where and with what. You eschew moderation in which areas? I think Trump ran on a pretty centrist platform.
Yes, I know. He doesn't mean he needs to govern from the center. You do what you do to get elected, and you implement the correct strategy, which is to completely punish anybody involved in that his political persecution. He needs to make an example of everybody that's involved. So any future person might think twice and three times before embarking on such a reckless and destructive plan. So that's
okay. So the difference is between 70 IQ, 100 IQ, and 150 IQ retribution. So you tick off someone with a 70 IQ, and they will likely respond by punching you, kicking you, and beating you up. You tick off someone with a 100 IQ, they're also very likely to respond immediately. You tick off someone with 150 IQ, they may not act for years. They may befriend you, and they may give you advice. And then as you slowly implement their advice and you think they're suddenly on your side, you will slowly strangle yourself. So higher IQ people take a lot more time. They're a lot more careful with how they pursue retribution. Right? Someone with 150 IQ is far less likely to punch you in the face when you tick them off, as opposed to pursuing a long-term plan to more effectively turn you in and turn you over and do you like a dinner.
I don't know. It feels like I don't think your analogy is exactly appropriate. So, if you kill your enemy is dead. They can't hurt you.
Oh, except you'll get arrested and you'll likely spend the rest of your life in prison. So for most people, killing your enemy, if your enemy is a fellow citizen, is a really bad life strategy for your own interests.
What if they deserved it?
Doesn't matter. It's a terrible strategy. So I'm concerned that what you're advocating is just a terrible strategy. That you have to be intelligent about how you go about these things. Just blindly acting out with retribution just for an individual in daily life. Like, let's say you get a promotion and then you suddenly have the power to hire and fire, and you just, on day one, you just fire everyone who's been a bastard to you. Might be a winning strategy, but there might be a much more effective strategy. So to immediately place retribution as your number one goal in life doesn't usually tend to be a winning strategy. On the other hand, I don't think you should completely abstain from it, but one needs to be intelligent. Donald Trump is open to mending fences with Morning Joe. I don't think that's a mistake. By your logic, he should tell them to F off.
He should tell them to F off. And maybe he has done that, in effect, by, he may be playing a deep game here, where he brings them in only to humiliate them. I don't think he's trying to mend fences with them. I think he hates their guts, and I think he's setting them up. What was it? So people have talked about this, and they mentioned the dinner with Romney. So he brought in Romney to have dinner.
And have it photographed. There were, I think, 2 meetings with Romney. He was dangling the office of Secretary of State in front of him, and he had 2 dinners with Romney and effectively humiliated Romney. But he didn't punch him in the face. Like, he welcomed in and took him to dinner.
Fair enough, but think of what Trump has had to endure. Like, people are primal. They're simple people, right? And sometimes they respond to just really crude expressions of force. They may not like it, but they respect it.
Right, and there's a time and a place for a crude expression of force, but you don't want to use a crude expression of force when it's against your interests. Right, in the workplace, you punch out someone who you use a crude expression of force in the workplace, the odds are 100 to 1. That's not going to work out well for you. On the other hand, you fire them in a way that minimizes your chances of getting sued and getting shot. All right, you bide your time. You wait until you've got thoroughly documentable reasons for letting someone go, and then you fire them, and you've got an ironclad protection against getting sued. Then you've been much more effective than if you just recklessly fire them and set yourself up for an embarrassing lawsuit.
So you're saying that revenge is a dish best eaten cold?
I'm saying that there are many priorities in life, and revenge and retribution is not inherently the number one priority for all people in all circumstances. It's a normal human emotion that should be employed strategically, just like where you stick your penis. You should employ the penetration of your penis into a vagina strategically. You don't just go around sticking it in any opening, right? You want to use good judgment, discernment, wisdom.
But most of the times these opportunities are inappropriate, but sometimes the opportunity is in fact appropriate, and then
right, and then I've been with women, and they'd say, "Look, I like it really hard from behind." Right, so then you use that raw force. But other times, it's not appropriate. They don't like it really hard from behind. They want something much more loving and intimate and gentle. So you want to use good judgment when you're using that raw, brutal force, or when you're using honeyed words.
Yeah, this is why I tune in every day, Luke, because it's wisdom like this that I need. Okay. Okay,
I remember that I would play High Infidelity. Do you remember that REO Speedwagon 1982 album, High Infidelity? Because it got my girlfriend going. That made her hot. Other times I would recite poetry to her. That would get her going.
The situation is the boss, isn't it?
The situation's the boss, bro.
Again, I'm humbled.
Are you noticing any more signs of the culture cleaning up and healing? I hear the sounds of healing in the background right now.
Oh, is that audible? I have the windows open. It's a beautiful night. Strangely, I'm not noticing. I'm noticing there's a sort of just generalized calm that's fallen over the land, and I can't read much into it. Poker faced. The climate is currently poker faced. I think people are stunned still. I think there's probably a recognition going that something is broken in their worldview, and they can't quite put their finger on it. And then again, I don't really talk about politics with your average normie.
Right, but you sense a vibe shift. There's a vibe shift going on.
Yeah. It's not joy. It's not brat. It's a different vibe shift. It's a shift towards neutrality, if anything. I don't think the Democrats have a problem. The liberals have a problem because if they could utter this out loud, they'd throw every tranny under the bus and never think about them again. I watched Halpern today, and someone called in and they're asking about the donor community and what the donors were saying about this. And they have questions. They're asking a lot of legitimate questions like, how did you blow all this money so irresponsibly, And so part of me thinks, if you're a donor and you've come into these sums of money that you can throw it at a presidential election and still not know what went wrong, you didn't earn your money yourself. You may have inherited it, but you didn't earn it. Because if you'd earned it, you'd have the street sense to understand what went wrong. It would be immediate to you. So there's some sort of, I'm thinking about Silicon Valley money. There's a lot of funny money out there in the hands of people that just seem to have gotten lucky rather than built something. I don't know. I thought it was.
Or people can be wise in different areas. I suspect that most of the donors to the Democratic Party were wise in particular areas, but that does not necessarily bestow wisdom about the overall body politic, particularly the politics of people with a different hero system from yourself. So people are complicated. Like, people have wisdom that is domain specific. So there are areas of life where you're wise, and then there are other areas of life where you're ignorant, and other areas of your life where you're mediocre, and other areas of your life where you've got fresh, exciting perspectives, and other areas of your life where you're completely out of touch. I mean, wisdom, morality, these are all domain specific.
Well, don't you think a lot of these people want to know the name of the person that concocted this joy strategy? I mean, do we know that person?
Yeah, Jennifer O'Malley. She ran the campaign.
Okay, and so was this her brainchild, or did she just take someone else's recommendation?
Well, I'm sure she took someone's recommendation, but then she had the power to run with it. And then when they saw in their private polling that it wasn't going to get it done, they started switching to different messages. I mean, the Trump campaign's been pretty confident for a year that they had this in the bag, and Kamala Harris constantly changing messages. It shows that the Democrats also realized that they were running from behind. Kamala always ran as an underdog, so she knew from private polling that each message she tried out was not sufficient, was not getting it done. So she had to keep changing messages, while Trump just hammered on just a handful of messages: immigration, crime, tariffs, inflation.
Yeah, I mean, she was obviously told not to answer any questions in a substantive way. And, a case can be made that was a big part of her undoing. But any of the harder questions that she would be presented with, she wouldn't have it just doesn't exist an answer that middle America would find satisfying.
Right. They kept changing strategy. They didn't keep changing strategy because they saw that they had an unimpeachable lead. They kept changing strategy. They kept changing they kept changing messages. All right, because they knew they were running behind, and if you're trailing, you start getting more experimental, right? If you're trailing by 21 points in the fourth quarter, you're less likely to run the ball up the middle. You're going to start throwing the ball long. And all their desperate changes in message and in strategy were indicating they knew that they were trailing in the fourth quarter, and they were desperately trying something new. They were desperately trying to hook on to news of the day. All right, they had all these signs of a losing campaign.
Well, even before it was clear that she was losing. So in the early days of Biden's, so in retrospect, it seems clear that that whole debate with Trump, this was planned long before. I think when they put Biden out there to debate Trump, they knew he was going to blow it because they knew their hand was forced at that point. Do you think that result?
I don't agree. No. I think it's entirely possible that Biden could have had a better day and a better performance, right? Biden isn't that senile all the time, right? He has good days and bad days, right? Trump was lucky or unlucky in a sense that he got Biden on a particularly bad day. I think on a different day, Biden might have given a better performance.
I tend to disagree, but I don't know. It'll be interesting when this book is finally written. It'll be worth reading. Yeah. I guess then, once it became clear that Biden wasn't going to prevail, I'm sure there were a lot of people that knew Kamala was a weak hand.
Yeah.
Right? And so that decision to go with her versus someone else who would have stood a better chance, that's a decision I'd like to understand as well.
Because Nancy Pelosi wanted an open primary. All sorts of people wanted an open primary. But when Joe Biden, 30 minutes after his public announcement that he was stepping down, he then publicly endorsed Kamala Harris, that ended the prospects of an open primary.
So it's that simple? So all Biden had to do was mutter into the microphone, and that was
No, he didn't mutter. He made a public announcement on Twitter. Remember, he didn't say any words when he stepped down. He just published a letter on Twitter.
Well, I remember back then there was speculation that it wasn't he himself who was in control of his Twitter account. Do you believe that?
Well, obviously he wasn't posting it, but he would have okayed it.
Was he in a position to know what he was okaying and the consequences? I don't know. We'll find out. There's a book that's going to be written, and we're going to read it, and it's going to be great. It's going to be another...
It's going to be so much fun.
Another orgy of Schadenfreude.
I can't wait, man. I'm going to read every compelling book about this election.
This beats Clinton by a country mile.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
thanks, bro.
I didn't have much beyond that.
Thanks, bro.
All right.
Blessings. Okay. Take care.
One for the history books. The ladies of The View saw right through it.
A lot of people who are probably looking at what Joe and Mika did and find it opportunistic. There are people who change their stripes, or maybe their spots, I should say, today, depending on who is in power and what benefits them. I don't know that that's what they are doing.
There's no way legacy media is going to stop Trump if The View's beefing with Morning Joe. No way. The resistance media is being divided and conquered. And common sense is even making a comeback in Canada. Trudeau sounds like Stephen Miller.
Immigration. Let's talk about it. In the last 2 years, our population has grown really fast, like baby boom fast. And increasingly, bad actors like fake colleges and big chain corporations have been exploiting our immigration system for their own interests. So we're doing something major. We're reducing the numbers of immigrants that will come to Canada for the next 3 years.
Disney just announced it's removing trans characters, and Berkeley's cracking down on homeless encampments. The whole world's changing. The deep state's starting to lawyer up, and K Street is scrambling. Lobbyists are freaking out because they don't know any of Trump's cabinet picks.
Are you going to be closing down departments?
We expect mass reductions. We expect certain agencies to be deleted outright. We expect mass reductions in force in areas of the federal government that are bloated. We expect massive cuts among federal contractors and others who are overbilling the federal government. So, yes, we expect all of the above.
Trump's the candidate of hope and change now. Sorry, Barack. There's a mandate, and he's picking the right people to execute it. He's not just draining the swamp, he's destroying it. Each cabinet pick has a stick of dynamite. But this wrecking crew can't even start the job unless the Senate consents. That's the first big battle. Trump's uniting the country, and he's not even president yet. He's creating the unity that Biden promised but never delivered. We're at the beginning of a cultural renaissance. It would be a shame if something as pitiful as politics stood in the way. Chicago Bear legend and NFL Hall of Famer Brian Urlacher joins me now. All right, so Brian, you played with a lot of these guys doing the Trump.
Okay, let's get more here from Steve Bannon. I think his perspective, it shook me up when I listened to this Sunday night. I think, okay, these are some pretty strong arguments.
For your audience, understand we have a government that's $6.5 trillion a year, but the contingent liabilities, 37 trillion in debt, contingent liabilities over 100, vast assets, but spending 6-7 trillion a year, massive deficits. But in that, you have about 2.5 million civilians, roughly 2.5 million service employees, so about 5 together. You have 18 million contractors. Of 9 million of those are just cleaning the bills. So you have 9 million kind of working contractors. Half of those are executives. So let's say another 4 or 5 million. So 10 million, which makes sense, to run an apparatus that's $7 trillion a year. To do that, you get 4,000 people. 3,000, Sean, as you remember, we can send in a landing team, beach jet team. They can go in. As long as they get a security clearance, they can hit the deck place running. 1,000, the top guys, secretaries, cabinet guys, undersecretaries, have to be Senate confirmed. Now, in the White House, Sean Spicer and Steve Bannon don't need any confirmation. They're part of that 3,000 that just hit the deck plates running. So this is why President Trump, I think, has to get the team together, very organized, to make sure that we can kind of hit this thing running, and it's as much organized as possible. At the same time, put the Senate Republicans on notice. Hey, you're essentially the Human Resources Department. I need these guys right here set up and teed up to go. For folks that watch this show, I think you should be prepared for a firestorm over the next, even before Inauguration Day. You're going to have a firestorm on basically what's going to be the approval of these guys with the confirmation. The advice and consent of the Senate, I think, will be the TV rights will be worth a lot of money, Sean.
I love that. The TV rights will be worth, yeah. What do you think about, I mean, you mentioned Gaetz. He announced on Wednesday as the Attorney General. That's the one where I think they might let some of these other guys go because they think because they're qualified. Gaetz, I wonder how many Republicans are willing to dig in their heels and say, this is a bridge too far for me. Or do they say, I got to get President Trump this?
I absolutely agree. I think that is why it's a great acid test. First off, if I'm Pete Hegseth, the Tulsi Gabbard, I go, right? Because listen, Gaetz hit over the battlefield as an airburst. I mean, it shocked everybody. And I think President Trump is putting on notice of what he intends to do as he confronts the debt ceiling and the massive deficits and the tax, everything economically, the border, the deportation. I mean, Stephen Miller and these guys right now, there won't be any stories about Miller being a Nazi for a while because Gaetz gets to the heart of the city. Let me go back to what I said about.
I mean, this is extraordinary tour de force here by Steve Bannon.
About Attorney General. Here's the reason. Everything in this city is basically about lawyers. It just is. The Constitution is simply a contract. The Constitution is a contract between 13 unequal entities to merge into a merger of equals to kind of form a nation. Everything from there is a contractual relationship. The AG, the Attorney General, is the most complicated job, and particularly President Trump, in trying to deconstruct the administrative state, particularly try to take on the deep state. You're obviously intel people are important. Your people at DOD are important. The White House counsel and those people are important. But the people who are going to lead that are really the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, the DAG. You have to have a team. And I agree with you. I think that this is where a couple of those senators, first off, you're going to lose Murkowski and Collins. So you're at 51. You got to hold the line. And I think this is where Trump says, hey, look, I could have easily fought you. I could have gotten all these guys up, the Sean Spicer and the Bannon. I could have worked them all up. Their audiences would have been I didn't do that. Right? You said you were going to back my choices. This is my choice. Give me some advice and then give me your consent.
Give me your consent. So who is there someone like, I think like to me, the border security team, particularly Tom Homan, I think that was like the best signal to me for people who are concerned about immigration and our nation's security. When Tom Homan got that announcement, I said, hey, guess what? Like, I think it sent chills through the cartels. They went, oh crap, we might need to get into another line of work.
And also with Stephen Miller at the same time, as you know, Stephen he has a House style that is it's a little blunt. To make him the first announced deputy chief of staff for policy and announce he's going to be the connective tissue with Homan. I think what President Trump also did in announcements, you did all the comm strategy for us besides being the spokesman. People don't realize, Sean, I'm sure your audience doesn't. Sean did something that's very unique. I don't really remember anybody else doing it. He was the comms director, which is one of the most complicated jobs in the White House. All communications comes through one guy. And I mean, everything from it's National Pancake Day to we're going to war, right? It's definitely
I love Pancake Day.
And everything in between. But then you're also the press secretary. The press secretary, every day I'd walk in, Sean being this binder, I'd walk in, there'd be 30 guys. They murder board this guy because you have to. It's so complicated. So I think that is why the announcement of what they did here, I think, was quite strategic. They held off the head of DHS. And in fact, it was kind of confusing at first. It was Homan DHS, borders or whatever. But when they named him and Miller at the same time, you kind of understood, okay, they're hardwiring the White House to these agencies. And then to name Governor Noem the next day as DHS kind of shows you she'll probably do more of the terrorism and the Secret Service and that. This is your team. I also think this is why it was important to announce Bill McGinley, announce the White House counsel. I think what you're seeing is that they're kind of doing verticals. You announce a Walls, right? And then you've got Hegseth a couple of days later, right? So you announce these verticals, what's going to happen, either National Security Council to the Pentagon, National Security Council to the Secretary of State, White House Council to DOJ, and I'm sure NEC and the Domestic Policy Council will be around who Treasury Secretary is, et cetera. So I think it's a very smart information and communication strategy.
Okay. You last time in 2016 were instrumental in key positions. I mean, I think SecNav, Secretary of the Navy rather, and Joint Chiefs, other key functions. Who do you really want to fight for right now? What positions are you trying to get to Trump and say, these are the ones that I think are critical to a successful second term?
The ones I fought for to date have been, my belief from the beginning is that the 2 or 3 most important that must be done properly is the Attorney General with the White House counsel and the people around him. That DOJ is absolutely important. Let's throw FBI in there. What I would call that.
So will he fire? Will he fire Ray?
100% day one. I mean, they're down to the FBI situation is absolutely critical. So so that's important, right? You've got to keep that. I think the other is what I call the economic, because the firestorm is going to come with the debt ceiling and the budget and all that. You have to have Treasury, you have to have NEC, and all the Treasury kind of guys kind of lined up. That has to be one. And then the third is the mass deportations. That's Homan and Stephen Miller. If you can take care of those 3, like Rubio, people say, well, why are you blowing Rubio up? You're America first, and he's a neocon. I said, well, besides the fact he's anti-CCP, to me, that's just not in my bailiwick. Those 3 power agencies right now, you have to do that correct. If you don't do that correct, President Trump's second term is going to get a little bumpy. So, I know DOD is important and all that. It'll kind of fall into place. But you got to get those 3 correct.
So could you give him a name? Have you given him a name, or do you want somebody in particular for FBI?
I've given him a name and worked quite hard for the FBI.
Okay. You mentioned the CCP. I believe.
I think, by the way, I think the FBI ought to be taken apart, shut down as a federal agency, go to Congress and undo it, and rebuild a federal law enforcement force if you need it somehow around the U.S. First thing I do with the FBI is go over there with the 250 lawyers they have, clean them all out, send them over to DOJ, and then maybe use them after you fire all the U.S. attorneys.
Okay, here's some highlights from Mark Halperin's show this
I want to
morning.
start by talking, guys, about what I call the controversial 5, the nominees. Go ahead and put up their pictures, please, who may or may not make it. And there are people who say all 5 will make it, and people who say none of the 5, and people who say some of the 5, but have different perceptions. Sean, who are on that list right now? Who are who would you say are the 2 most unlikely to be confirmed?
I think the obvious answer is Gaetz and Hegseth. But here's the thing about confirmation hearings: things come out about individuals, comments get made, right? So did someone try to trip them up and ask them some random question? I remember there was an ambassador, and I couldn't even remember. I think it was under Obama. They were asked something about the country they were going to serve, and they couldn't answer the language that was spoken in the country, and it made them look like a fool. Dan,
no one met with Argentina.
Thank you.
Question.
There's my lifeline. I use that if I can't phone a friend. But anyway, I say that because it's obvious, right? But I also think that Trump has made it very clear that he wants, especially Matt Gaetz, to go through. And if you listen to the Sunday show, even the detractors are saying, I'm going to give him a shot. So I say that only because it's the conventional wisdom, but I still maintain that all 5 get through.
Okay, Dan, which 2 do you think are most endangered?
I think Hegseth is the most endangered by a lot. I think there's just going to be more of a drip, drip, drip. And we haven't, the focus hasn't even really gotten to some of his more controversial statements that he's made about who should and should not serve and the roles in combat. I actually think Gaetz is going to get through. I think MAGA is going to draw a line and dig in on this one. He's of them. I think they love that people hate him. And so I think there's going to be a staring match between those two camps. I'm not sure who the fifth one is, or the second one would be of the five. I think, to Sean's point, if somebody has a bad hearing, perhaps, but I think 4 of the 5 will get through, but 1 gets sacrificed to the confirmation gods.
I don't think I don't think what Dan is saying can be understated. Like Matt is like a deity in MAGA world, and the idea they feel like it's not about him. He is the vehicle. Whereas Pete is not. I mean, he's obviously a co-host on Fox and Friends Weekend, well liked. I mean, but he's not. He doesn't have. Because of the nature of the job, it's not like he's out there the same way that Matt was going after DOJ and hearings and things like that. It's not. I'm not trying to compare the two in terms of their dedication to the cause. More that Matt has been able to be in hearings where he has these viral clips of him attacking folks from DOJ and railing against them. So for that reason, I don't think that people care. And also the DOJ, they believe, is what was more weaponized than anything else. If you're not a DOD employee, contractor, member of the military, you might not be as passionate about reform in DOD as people. Everyone in MAGA world knows what DOJ has done or not done. And so I think the one is a cause celeb, the other isn't. And so for those reasons, I think what Dan said is spot on.
So you guys are much more bullish on his confirmation prospects than the conventional wisdom, or what I call the Gang of 500, which is interesting to me. So I just want to explore for a moment. MAGA did not get its choice for Senate Majority Leader.
Yeah.
And I don't get the sense from John Thune's body language that he's going to whip this vote, for Gaetz. Don't just to play devil's advocate a bit, don't you think the clubbiness of the Senate is going to be immune to what MAGA wants?
So one, remember that Senate majority vote was secret. So they all got to hide behind the secret, I don't want to tell you who my vote was for. 2, Trump didn't weigh in on it. And so no one feels like they went against Trump. I mean, we all know that he would have probably preferred Rick Scott. But at the end of the day, I also think now having to publicly vote against Matt Gaetz for no reason, and again, it's not about Matt. Matt is the vehicle to get justice at the Department of Justice. And
all right, that's a key point. It's not about Matt Gaetz. All right, I am not a fan of Matt Gaetz, but the move of Matt Gaetz to Attorney General has nothing to do with Matt Gaetz. It's about accomplishing Donald Trump's agenda.
And so if you vote against Matt Gaetz without any solid evidence, you are going to feel the wrath of MAGA.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, that's why I think this early, unless something comes up between now and that vote where some of Trump's capital bleeds out a little bit, he's going to enter that fight with maximum power. And do you want to start the new Congress going to war with the online army so that when you go home, you are just being beat up in town halls? Like, you almost don't even want to show your face. Once you leave Capitol Hill and you go back to the real world at home, you will be tormented. And maybe Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski, but unless like 7 other members are willing to join in, do you want to be the John McCain going like this and have to go home? I just don't see it unless it's a whole bunch of them.
And also, everybody talks about this in terms of them being in cycle when they're up for re-election. Dan's right. I mean, for 4 years, you're just going to get the crap kicked out of you. Number one. Number two, you don't think you have to work with the president on anything else. Maybe it's an ag issue, a tariff issue, a project in your district or your state. Like, this is not about 4 or 6 years from now getting reelected. This is about waking up tomorrow and being shunned and not having anyone return your calls, not getting those.
Right. So if I hadn't watched this show, I wouldn't have considered these perspectives. Just on my own with the regular news, I would have thought it's ridiculous. There's no way that Matt Gaetz, Pete Hegseth, Bobby Kennedy can get confirmed. But
tours, all the crap that senators care about, they will come after you, and the White House will be told you are persona non grata.
Yeah, I have to say, although appearances to the contrary, my full-time job is not promoting two-way. I will say all 3 of us are much more bullish on Matt Gaetz being confirmed than the rest of the media. Okay, so if you're watching this show, I will just point out to you, you're being given an opportunity to understand we might end up being wrong. But if he's confirmed, you've heard an explanation here that is not on offer in the rest of the media, which is not just biased against Trump, but tends to cover confirmation hearings of troubled nominees as if they're doomed until the day they either get confirmed or the plug gets pulled. So we'll see.
Right. Great points there. Let's get more here from Halperin.
The talk of, all right, Trump and the left. The talk of the world this morning is something that happened on MSNBC at 6 o'clock. Let's listen.
Well, fast forward.
It was just looking at social media here. They're split. I mean, I think there are some people that think they went there because they fear being prosecuted and they're doing it, simply for ratings. And other people who think the party needs to kind of move past calling Trump Hitler and a fascist and start actually engaging with the other half of the country. So my bet is the answer lies somewhere in between. They are business people, and MSNBC continues to struggle a little bit. And Trump was gold for them in 15 and 16, or at least part of 16. And I think they do recognize that, like, what they did in terms of just trashing the hell out of them didn't work with ratings, and it didn't work politically for the party.
Yeah. They're my close friends, I'll say, for those who don't know. Sean, what will MAGA think about this, and why did Trump do it?
I think MAGA will be kind of split the same way the left is. There are some people who say, hey, Trump gets to do what Trump gets to do. Here's my problem with this. When you ended the clip, Joe says afterwards, we told him we opposed him on this. We opposed him on that. We opposed him on this. If they wanted to come down and say, hey, Mr. President, we bashed you. We said you were wrong on all these issues and we were wrong, and you have the right now to govern, and we'd like to open up communications. First of all, I still say get in the back of the line. There are people who put up yard signs. There are people who made phone calls. There are people who fought hard for President Trump. They get to shake his hand first, not these people who spent 7 years, as Mika said, trashing the guy, lying about him, defaming him, right? So you go to the back of the line before you get to jump it and come up to Mar-a-Lago and shake his hand. But it wasn't that. Joe said we told him to his face that he was still wrong. We disagreed with him. So this was a pure transactional ratings play. This was Joe Scarborough realizing that his ratings are down 40%, 49%. Comcast wants to spin them off, and them worried about whether or not they're going to continue to afford their place on wherever it is, Nantucket, Palm Beach, all those places. This was a pure transactional play, and there's no one that is more transactional in the world than Joe Scarborough. So I was frankly disgusted by this. I think Trump wants them to atone for it, and it was pretty clear by that comment that they have no desire to do that.
So again, talk a little bit. Hold on. Go ahead. You go.
I was going to say, my sense is for Trump, this was like dining with Mitt Romney in 16 and getting photographed. He knows who the beggars are, and I'm sure it gives him, a great pleasure to see that Joe and Mika came to kiss the ring. Like, for him, it's
but that's my point, Dan, is that they didn't. They came and then they
turned. They did. They can say what they want, but he knows. I know. They came to see me to make amends with me, and they called me Mr. President, right? Like, end of story.
Sean, do your Trump imitation. Do a stream of consciousness of how you would think about while he's waiting for them to show up.
It's funny because Mika comes down all the time. They came in with Joe and she said, Mr. President, I want you to marry us. And I said, I don't know how to do it. And then, Joe came in and he begs me, he gets down on 2 knees and says, Donald, please let me marry her. I know I need your blessing. And I gave it to him. And now they're horrible to me.
All right. Do you think Trump got out of the meeting what he wanted?
I think he got what Dan said. He wanted them to come in. He probably made them wait 15 minutes. And he walked in and said, oh, you guys were wrong. You've been so horrible to me. And they said, well, we wanted to open the lines of communication. And yes, he got it. But I don't think he'll reward bad behavior like that.
I do think it's interesting it didn't leak. It happened Friday and they announced they did it, which I find it's a little bit of deference to them.
Well, I think that I think that's a great point, because right now, I don't know how you can, having been down there last week, you can't leak anything. There's not even you can't not leak something.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that I think that's important. They probably just thought we want to get ahead of it with our narrative before he says it.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see what he says about it when he says something about it.
I imagine after that statement, there will be a truth, probably about.
Yeah, it could happen during this program.
Yeah, and it's going to say something like Mika and Joe came to beg for forgiveness. The last time she came here, she was,
Yeah.
No. He was just very gracious. Now, Megyn Kelly was just appalled by Morning Joe. I'm not appalled. All right. Yeah, they said a lot of over-the-top criticisms and horrible things about Donald Trump. Who also said horrible things about them. But they're in a highly competitive industry, and you tend to say horrible things about each other. So I don't think they're frauds. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Morning Joe hosts trying to build a bridge back to Donald Trump.
We are beginning today with the absolutely ridiculous pair on the MSNBC morning show, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. How long have they been telling us that he's an existential threat, that he's a Hitler-esque figure, that he's a fascist, that women will die if he gets elected? Well, they've done a 180. They've done a 180 as their ratings circle the bowl. And we've got the sound bites to show you exactly what we're talking about. Joining me now to discuss it, Glenn Greenwald, host
1932.
His obsession with Hitler that has now come out.
This is not a reach. I could go back and talk about Nazi Germany, and I do it without any concerns whatsoever.
Who they are running against. A dark, dismal, fascist, and increasingly obviously fascist person. He's
right. During highly competitive times, such as elections, people say incredible things. All right, let's get Kip back onto the show. Kip, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, you're light on your feet tonight, like a Baryshnikov or a Gregory Hines or something. Where's that coming from?
I think I'm just energized by Trump and the discussion of his cabinet picks and thinking about things from a different perspective, listening to Steve Bannon. He's got a lot of energy. So I found listening to Bannon cranked me up.
You're almost levitating, sort of in a weightless state. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, that's how I feel.
Yes. But as I often tell you, it's important to get free from attachments because this world it'll suck you in through your own cravings. You know what I mean? It's a world of illusions. And right now you're feeling good and I'm feeling good and we're all feeling good because this 8-year-old, we've lived through 8 years of a psyop, this Trump is Hitler psyop that seems to have just lifted away like a dark cloud. Don't you think that's a big part of it? That psyop that's just kind of going away after being so hot and heavy for 2,900 days?
Well, I wouldn't call it a psyop. It's just that people with a different hero system were in control. And you can always point out the dangers of attachment. You can always point out the dangers of desire. What I never hear you talk about are the dangers of detachment and the dangers of having no desire. Yeah, there are downsides to being happy. There are downsides to having desire. There are downsides about being deeply connected to the world and to the community and to the nation around you. But there are also downsides to being disconnected from everyone around you, disconnected from your people, disconnected from your nation, disconnected from your president, disconnected from the hurly-burly and complicated, messy world of power and strength and safety and violence and all the mess of the real world, right? So I am all for letting your emotions rip while also maintaining an ability to simply observe and notice your emotions rip through you so that they don't necessarily master you. You allow yourself to experience life, but at the same time, you maintain a little bit of perspective.
Right. But like I know, that the Dems, they're not going away. They're just stunned right now. They're just licking their wounds. And they're just trying to refine that mousetrap. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Who was it? Who's your friend? Claire Call?
Yes.
She knows they own those women. She knows they can read them like a book. And she knows they're just going to do some focus groups. And they're going to reel them in just the way Betty Crocker did, selling that cake mix. You get what I'm saying, sir?
Yeah, I recognize that we have two dominant political parties in the United States and that no one party has a commanding hold on a majority. And they're going to get some wins. And I will experience some temporary sadness when they get their wins. But I'm not going to be devastated. I didn't take to bed when Joe Biden won. My happiness level dipped for a few hours, maybe even a day, but then pretty soon thereafter, I was back to normal. So almost all my friends and almost my entire religious community are all on board with Trump. So this is a joyous occasion that we're celebrating together.
The only thing we have to ask ourselves is, does it make us a bad person for enjoying their misery right now, enjoying that stunned look on their face?
No, I don't think we even have to. Yeah. I don't think we have to ask that. I think it's just fine. It's normal human reaction to enjoy what's going on. It would be inhuman not to enjoy it.
Right. I just wanted to kind of I don't know, maybe make a general point. Just about even going back to the time of Jesus. You know, if you go back to what they call it, the Koine Greek from the original text, I think he was called like a tectic, which was a craftsman, but somehow through the King James version, they turned that into a carpenter, right? They turned him to a carpenter or whatever. But even the books back from those times, you know, the stuff they find at Nag Hammadi and a lot of the old tracks from back in the day, you know, they had Jesus down as a magus or a magi. And even like in the 200s and 300 ADs, you can see all the Romans, they're trying to do mandates to try to get people to lay off the magic and practice more white magic and less black magic. And then even in the time of, say, the first universities like at Paris and Salamanca and Toledo, graduate magic was graduate level studies. And if you can think, like even in the time of the Protestant Reformation, guys like Martin Luther was ragging on the Catholic Church, calling them basically a church full of sorcerers, you know. So, and even in the time of, say, 16s and 1700s England, if you see some of those around their fireplaces, they have these look like almost geometric designs with a bunch of lines going around them. They're called hexafoils, and that's to keep the demons, you know, from stopping at the fireplace and not going around the house, you know. So this kind of stuff, I'm just trying to say all that just to preface that by saying that we swim in an ocean of magic and what one man maybe calls you know, religion and psychology and the occult and magic and philosophy. You know, they're all related. They're all related to the metaphysical, and from political platforms to corporate logos to jingles, and it's all predictive programming, and just we're assaulted all the time. So I'm just trying to tell you that some of that airiness that Mr. Luke Ford feeling is I kind of feel like we've just been under a full court press for such a long time, and they got defeated, you know, and they're having to kind of regroup here and kind of playing along some of those old school lines, you know. I got to thinking about the original idea of a king. You know, it's kind of a magical idea where he was kind of you know, a lot of people don't realize when they see that crown and those jewels and stuff that he was kind of like a bridge between heaven and earth, you know, so it's sort of a cosmic thing. But as you know, through the lineages, it all goes downhill, you know, and it just like with a good corporation or whatever, usually the leadership goes downhill the same as it does with a good king. But I was just wanting to say that Trump, I was getting that image of kind of that original king, that sort of a magical cosmic image, because he did get through 2 assassination attempts on his way to this presidency. He does have a wound like Jesus, you know, to show for it. He did defeat Kamala. He defeated Biden, Oprah, Beyonce, Mark Cuban, Robert De Niro, Barbara Streisand, Saturday Night Live, 60 Minutes. He defeated lawfare in the United States. You know, they lowered themselves to go after him through lawfare. He defeated their ass to be president. He defeated the deep state and those 51 liars that told stories about the whole Biden laptop. He defeated Facebook and Twitter, who thought it was okay to take the leader of the free world off of the social platform, you know, out of the public square. He defeated them. He defeated those jerks in woke Hollywood. He defeated corporate America and their whole DEI stuff. Now, that stuff ain't rolled back yet, but his being made president defeated that and told them they're going to have to rethink some of that stuff. He defeated that god-awful whatever liberalism has turned into now, as well as The View and Jimmy Kimmel and all that other stuff. So I just, you know, I don't think he's.
I think what you're touching on is one definition of charisma is when you do the seemingly impossible, and Donald Trump has done the seemingly impossible, and so that gives you great charismatic power, and then if he does the impossible again, he'll get more resources. All right, he'll become more powerful. He'll have a bigger pull until eventually he's unable to keep doing the impossible. Right, nobody's able to keep doing the impossible, but it sure looks like he's doing the impossible right now.
Yeah. I mean, I know I did overkill there, but I was just trying to get you to see that's a hell of a set of hurdles, wasn't it, Luke Ford? You know what I mean?
He did what looked like the impossible.
Yeah. So really, I just want to tell you a great show and just make those couple of points, and don't slow down because of me. Keep it rolling, buddy. Thank you.
Okay, great to talk to you, Kip. Thanks, man. All right, I want to finish off here a little bit from Sarah Isgur, Dispatch podcast. I found this quite amusing. The Trump picks so far.
Contend with them. I guess my sort of bottom line for Thune is I expect that he's going to do as much as he can. He's a deeply religious man. He does sort of think about long-term.
How do you know if someone's deeply religious or not? All right, because they go through the rituals, because they say they're deeply religious. And just because someone puts out the image that he's deeply religious, it doesn't make him more likely to be moral or to be clear thinking. It's just another presentation of the self.
Issues. He does care about things like integrity. I think he'll.
And because he's deeply religious, because he puts out the image that he's deeply religious, therefore you think he cares about integrity? We're discussing the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune. I just think that's incredibly naive. All right, we all present ourselves certain ways, but presentation is not reality.
Do everything he can to sort of keep things on the rails, but he is going to become the guardrail in some senses. And I think that's going to be a really challenging moment for him.
He will be the guardrail as long as he sees that as being in his best interest. When he sees that being a guardrail and an opposition to Donald Trump is not in his best interest, he will abandon that role. That was Steve Hayes. And now here comes Sarah Isgur.
All right, a quick not worth your time question mark. So I have mentioned this to both of you before, that in my youth, I had a rule. And the rule was that if a man had the courage to ask me out on a date, that you as a woman should simply say yes to a first date. Now, there's important points to this rule. I don't put out on a first date, like it's really just to get to know you. And there's certainly no guarantee of a second date. And if on the first date, I know that there's not going to be a second date, I also like to pay for myself. I'm not looking for a free meal here either. I'm not, scamming the system, but I think it's a pay it forward system, right? You want men to have that courage because you want the guy who you actually like and want to end up with to have the courage. And if he's been shot down 20 times in a row and he sees you and he's like, what's the point? And he just walks off, that would be a real bummer. So it's a pay it forward system. So that important policy that I had has led to 2 first dates with people who are currently in the news. And I thought you guys would get a kick out of it.
Oh boy.
One, which my students always just hooted and hollered about when I was teaching undergrads, Ben Shapiro. He took me out for hot chocolate and laid out his, plan for life. It was a very almost like business style interview as a first date. And he told me he was going to be bigger than Rush Limbaugh, that he was going to have this, media empire. And I was like, yeah, I don't go on second dates with guys in fantasy land. So that should tell you how good I am at those type things. And the second one is our newly announced Solicitor General, John Sauer. And David, I'm sure we'll talk more about a bunch of the DOJ appointments on AO proper at some point. But John Sauer is truly one of the smartest human beings I have ever spent 3 hours with. He took me to a Shakespeare play. It was one of the Henrys, and I don't remember which one. And under his breath was basically just reciting all of the lines because
Amazing.
He has that kind of memory. Not that he thinks this Henry was particularly special, but that his memory and mind is so expansive. He can speak wildly intelligently on any subject. A really interesting and smart person who will be the next Solicitor General of the United States. So I don't know, is my policy worth the time for young women because you end up going on first dates with interesting people? What do y'all think?
I was not expecting to answer that question. I don't know. I tend to prefer.
You're a man. Do you think it's insulting?
I think I would prefer if somebody actually did not want to genuinely go on the date for them to say no.
Okay. My also thing is I'm a terrible judge of character. So like I would judge a book by its cover and be like, no, but then it turns out if you had an hour of my time, I'd be pretty won over. Who knows? But that's a little bit of a separate issue. I think most people are bad at that, I guess, not uniquely me. But if you're really good at it, then yeah, if like you know that person's odious, then I don't think you have to go. But if you just don't know them very well. Okay, Steve, what do you think? Is it insulting or is it a good policy?
I will tell you where I thought that this was going. And I thought that you were going to end up telling us that you went on a date with Matt Gaetz and that explained.
So I pretty much have followed a similar principle. If a woman ever had the guts to ask me out, I'd always go out with her. If a woman tried to take me to bed and seduce her, I would. It just seemed ungentlemanly to say no.
Why you were defending him at this point?
I did spend quite a bit of time with him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner a number of years ago, but he was actually using me to try to get a date with a, well, I'm trying to think of whether I should tell this. Oh, it was a reporter at CNN who was single at the time. I don't think she went out with him. Okay, y'all heard the joke, right? That Donald Trump is thinking of using his recess appointments power to make Matt Gaetz Attorney General. And Matt Gaetz is really familiar with that because recess appointments is what he calls his dates.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk to you.